Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's great to have you all back in the room. I hope you enjoyed that extra little break. We now have our first panel discussion, and I'd love you to be involved. So if you go online to the program and just hit View Session, you'll see that there are questions in the chat. Some people are, asking you to... Oh yes, and we do have a microphone in the room as well. So if you'd rather just be in the room and present and make yourself known to everybody, we always recommend that you just hold your hand up so that I can see you, and a microphone will come your way as well. So there's two options. If you're in the room, of course, you can do it on the chat or with a microphone, and online, of course, you're absolutely welcome to ask questions as well. So please welcome to the stage our panel. We have Daniel Neuenschwander, who you've already heard. He is the Director of Human and Robotic Exploration at ESA. We have Kathryn Hadler, who is the Director of ESRIC, Julien-Alexandre Lamamy, who is the CEO of ispace Europe, Vlada Stamenkovic, who is the Senior Director of the Space Resources Program at Blue Origin, Charles Beigbeder, who is CEO of AUDACIA, an alternative investment fund and founding partner of Expansion, which is a European aerospace venture capital, and we have Lara Tassan Zanin, who is the Senior Advisor and Cyber Lead at the European Investment Bank. So please welcome them. Well, you sit here and I will stand. There we go. We have a lot of people. So what is really wonderful for me and rather unusual is that we're starting a conference with the finance people on the first panel. This is this is a break in the norm, which I am very excited by. Now, the title for this panel discussion is In Situ Resource Utilization for Sustainable Space Exploration. And I know, Julien, you've been awake all weekend pondering this title, and we were chatting about it outside in the sense that, of course, anything we do in space, the word sustainable and exploration, and indeed even Daniel, I wrote that when you were talking, you had some certain words, excavate, extract, in your slides. Of course, this is what space resource utilization will be. So the word sustainable. Julien, since we had an in-depth coffee chat earlier today, what do you understand by the word sustainable? In this context.
Yeah. Thank you for putting me on the spot. I thought we were in confidence, but...
Confidence in our little community here.
Maybe I'll start by giving some context, because iSpace was mentioned a couple times earlier this morning. And this year is a special year for us. We've been here 7 years. March 2017 is when we established here, in the wake of the Space Resources Initiative. And the reason for coming here was this alignment between the vision for space resources of Luxembourg and our own vision that we want to expand human presence in space by leveraging space resources. So that's maybe the first answer is, if we're really intent on having humans on the moon, on Mars, in space for the long run, we need to learn how to use the resources in situ, meaning on site. So I think that's one aspect of sustainability. Another aspect of sustainability for a commercial company like us, Blue Origin, others, I think is just responsible behavior. And one of the first projects we kickstarted once we arrived here in Luxembourg was a collaboration between iSpace, Carlos Espejel, and the University of Luxembourg, University of New South Wales, to write the first code on how to explore resources on the moon, document the results of exploration so that they're a benefit for everyone, and also address the question of responsible, as you said, extraction, exploitation, all those X's which can be
thought about in a different light.
Yes, thank you for helping me on this one. So I mean, that's the first part of the answer.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for your honesty in really trying to delve down into what sustainability means, and also for pointing out that as commercial companies, you're driven by the need to provide profits, but it may be slightly different when you're an organization like ESRIC, for instance. How would you define it?
So I think Julien's done an excellent job of explaining the two of the aspects of sustainability. For me, I think that there are three aspects to sustainability when we think in terms of space resources. So we have the economic sustainability. We have sustainability in terms of not being reliant on taking everything that we need from Earth with us, which Julien already mentioned. And the final one is our sustainability with respect to our use of resources. And this, with my terrestrial mining hat on and my expertise in terrestrial mining, I think this is the one that is, it's one of the big challenges. How do we go about space resources, ISRU, in a way that does not leave us with the legacy that we have left ourselves on Earth? And that's certainly what we're looking at in ESRIC.
And I have to go to the other big organizer in the room, which is ESA, of course. So Daniel, you gave us a wonderful keynote as well. You described a lot of the plans. In fact, when you were naming the decades into the 2040s, I was thinking, I can already see there's a lot of young faces in the audience, and I was wondering who will be the young faces here who will be doing that work in the 2040s. So along with space research, the other theme we have in science is probably longevity, so we need to work on both, I think. You need to add that to the ESA pool of science that's needed for space work. But of course, I did pick up on the words excavate, extract. How do you think about that when you are working with the fundamentals of future planning in ESA?
So first, let me start by thanking Julien, because I think if you're representing a company and you, in your first statement on stage, you say that I want to act in a responsible way, it's exactly what we want to bring forward as Europeans overall. So I think that's certainly something which is highly appreciated. Now, when it comes to sustainability and the work you want to extricate, I think there are 2 points which are really important. Number one is we have also to think about waste management, because it's not only about the transport where we want to reduce the CO2 footprint, etc. That's all important. But it's more, it's also how you act once you're on spot, how you conduct your operations. And this is, goes in the direction of your question. So what are we going to leave back? Because we want, I mean, the moon is only a springboard. We want to go further. So, but we will have to leave the moon surface in a way that it is also accessible and can be used by further generations. I think this is very important in all what we do. And we have not fully understood how the cislunar and moon surface operations will go in order to allow this sustainable approach. And let me add a last element. We are discussing, or we are promoting in the European Space Agency a zero debris policy. That's not only for low Earth orbit here, I mean a few hundreds of kilometers above our heads. It's also around the moon. And it's quite challenging because there is a competitive disadvantage as a company, as you just said, if you're keeping some capabilities also to ensure that. But I think it is of utmost importance, and this has also a value. It's not only about the business plan, there is also a value ultimately for a customer if you behave in a responsible way, and we want to promote this as ESA.
Thank you. Well, I'm turning to the other commercial venture in the room. That's Vlada. You're at Blue Origin. I know you're super excited about the work that you've been able to bring there in the last 4 years, and you're also very driven by the word sustainability. As you mentioned to me, again, behind the scenes, I hope I'm allowed to say this, Blue Origin hasn't been so present in these discussions yet, but now you're really out there and you're really part of the conversation. So talk to us about what's been happening and where you are right now and your vision on sustainability.
So I'm going to be careful what I say now in private. Absolutely.
I haven't said anything.
No, this is great.
Wrong.
I'll say this way. At Blue Origin, we have a vision that's been driving us for a long time, and that is really to have millions of people living and working in space for the benefit of Earth. And for me, the reason why I joined Blue Origin 4 years ago, left NASA and JPL for that, is because that has two aspects. And one aspect is to enable humanity as a whole to really be in space and to live and work there. Oh, this is the hint.
He has an earring.
There you go.
Earrings and microphones don't work.
We had a signal at the party. She's going to tell me, so be careful with earrings. But we'll put it down here and I'll forget that. So the important thing is that really being in space, living in space, working in space has two aspects, right? you gotta be able to never come back if you don't have to. And so for me, ISRU and space resources is not just something that reduces costs, makes things better. It is the difference. If we don't implement really ISRU and use space resources, we're gonna always fall back to the Earth. We're never gonna leave the Earth. And there is no sustainability without ISRU. It's not a nice to have. That's what we need to understand. Sometimes you have to go the extra mile to really enable what's needed. And so as long as we don't accept that ISRU and space resources is a requirement, we will not be successful. So that's the one aspect that's really, really important. The second aspect is for the benefit of Earth. And you see, I've spent a lot of time in my previous career making wonderful space missions, and I love that, going to Mars, going to explore, and that's wonderful, and that's important. But what's really important as well is to take care of our own planet. You know, if you look at that image, we're looking from the moon, but we see where we are. This is so far the only place we know in the universe where we can live and be happy. It's wonderful to be the moon, it's wonderful to be on Mars, but you know, I dare you to survive very long over there without any support systems. We love the air we breathe. And a lot of the technologies that we're building, that we're developing, have a clear impact, not just on paper or discussing. No, they can solve problems now. They can solve and help climate change mitigation, and they can bring more equity to the mass majority of this planet that is not as privileged as we are. And so these two aspects, really utilizing resources to enable, to make that paradigm shift in space to be there, plus taking these technologies to actually help communities all over the world. That's what we did in the last 4 years. And what we did at Blue Origin and the Space Resources Program is put our money where our mouth is. So we were, held back from being much present, watching, but we developed. We developed technologies that are functioning. One of the core technologies is Blue Alchemist, which is a system that for the moon will, ultimately take regolith and create solar panels and wire and oxygen with it and all kind of metals that are needed. So that's why it's called Blue Alchemist. Blue, I think you guess why, but Alchemist because it actually really takes things that are useless in so many ways and makes everything useful out of this. But in the same time, what's beautiful about this, right? When you have this technology that you do that, what we're doing actually is we're taking, again, useless things, making them useful. And rocks and sand and dirt, in many ways, is everywhere on the planet. And so far in the past, as a society, right, we've operated in a way that we went to places to find highly processed ores. It could be oil, it could be gold, right? Manganese, whatever it is. This is also a paradigm shift where we learn to take everything we need from a very unprocessed, low concentration body, which will allow us on this planet to do the same thing we do on the moon, which means we're gonna be able to take sand, rocks, dirt, that could be here in Luxembourg, it could be in Switzerland, it could be in Africa, it could be in India, and with this, we can extract the metals that we need in order to operate a society. That's iron, that's aluminum, that's silicon, that's many other things. At the same time, we can use this then to make primary power, solar panels. And that's just the beginning. Batteries, everything's following. It's a paradigm shift how we as a planet operate, from taking it from A to B, from actually affecting communities negatively, to actually being able to do it anywhere. And what's really important is these technologies on the moon, they don't involve carbon because there is not much carbon on the moon. The only carbon we'll leave really there is the one we bring ourselves. And so there is no effect on anything on a carbon footprint, so we have no carbon CO2 emissions. We're not using water, so we don't affect groundwater, so we don't use any chemicals. It's inherently not just green, but clean technologies. So what we're designing is a paradigm shift with this to access space. And that paradigm shift in space is creating a paradigm shift on this planet. And so Blue Origin has been dedicated to this. And we've built now a space resources program over the last 4 years. We have a Center of Excellence for Space Resources in Los Angeles, which we just actually moved in. It's 6,000 square meters. I'm a European in background, I'm Korean-American, but I get to shift from square feet to meters now. It's a whole campus, and we're right now 35 people, and we'll be 70 people by the end of summer. 70 people of the most diverse.
Are you hiring?
We are absolutely hiring. We are, so we're growing very much team. We got one of my colleagues right there sitting in front, Jesse Tornes, who's been really strongly leading also next to Blue Alchemist, our other developments that are related to water on the moon.
So quick question then, what have you learned about finance from Jeff Bezos?
Well, I can speak about him. I mean, one thing the reason why I joined Blue Origin is I see that the vision that Blue Origin has and that's propagating through Jeff is to really change the world for the better. But there's also an understanding that if you want to do that, we have to be sustainable in a financial way. And that's something that I had to learn in the last 4 years, because I was just a scientist, not I think just in the wrong way, but I was a scientist and an engineer. And I never understood, I was like, my ideas are amazing, just give me money. And I realized that a good scientist and a good engineer has not just to think about what makes sense to do, but to do it with the money that's around and to motivate and show people why money should be invested. You have to answer those questions. If you can't answer those questions, then you haven't thought enough about it. And so that's what we've learned. Think enough about how you make it economically viable. And that's what we're doing, because if we don't do that, there won't be that economy that we imagine.
Well, that brings us on to what really is a seismic shift in this conference, in that we have the finance here in the very first panel. So welcome, it's wonderful. We have you, Charles, and Lara as well. So 2 different finance centers. Charles, first of all, a lot of people won't have heard of AUDACIA and, of course, your expansion. So firstly, tell us about that.
All right, good morning, thank you. Yeah, expansion, well, it's an early stage venture fund dedicated to space tech. It's a European fund, so we invest everywhere in Europe. We are Franco-Swedish, based in Paris and in Stockholm, grouping together space tech experts and professionals from the private equity industry, the venture capital industry. And so we have created that fund 2 years ago. Now we have already deployed capital in 18 companies in Europe, and we are growing fast. We have the support from the EIF, the European Investment Fund, and some other important investors in Europe. And so I'm very happy to be here today at this Space Resource Conference. It might be a little bit strange to see a financier there, but it's not, because we are there to identify entrepreneurs that in every sector, sub-vertical of the, let's say, the space tech environment. And so why not space resource? I think I have already met some future entrepreneurs, and it's very interesting. Of course, we need, as it's high risk, we will need big market. I think that's clear. We need good technology, and to be sure the technology is there and ready, and the people, of course, and a nice team. So that's what we do.
I want to ask you, so you've already given us a tiny insight into the people that you will invest in. The title of this panel is about sustainability, and you want a profit eventually.
Yeah, but
so is it important for you that they are sustainable? How high on the list of points that you're looking for in a team? What is it apart from a nice team, a good idea, good technology? What else?
A company is not sustainable if it's not profitable. I'm talking about in the private sector. It would be a first definition.
Of course, that's true.
It has been said, by the way.
But on that point, sometimes people move towards profits and they cut corners. We've seen it in the past.
No, but think about it. So unfortunately, humankind has a little bit devastating Earth and the oceans, and now we are beginning to do it in the low orbit. There were 800 satellites 4 years ago, and now we have 8,000, and in 10 years we'll have 800,000. So if we are not very sustainable, it will be the end of the low Earth orbit, and so I don't know how we will go to the moon and to Mars. So really, that's why we have already, by the way, invested in 2 SSA firms. It's space situational awareness companies. It could be also another S, sustainable, because if we don't map, if we don't have a very precise cartography of all debris and objects in orbit, well, it will be the end of the space sector. So I think sustainability is at the core of our activity.
And when it comes to venture capital, normally we're looking at 5-year plans, but I guess with space you have a longer-term plan?
Yeah, we have a fund typically has a 10-year horizon, but it can be prolonged a little bit. But it's now that the opportunity is there. We have met 300 entrepreneurs in the space tech sector in Europe, and so it's now that we have to take these investments, and some of those firms will consolidate with each other. They will, some will disappear, some will be acquired by big firms, some will go public. So it's the right period, the right time horizon, because it's now that the opportunity is growing very fast. The experts estimate the market, the space tech market, at $1 trillion at the end of the decade. Now, some Chinese experts have said recently, no, it's not 1 trillion, it's 10 trillion. So I think the opportunity is clearly there. Of course, maybe not immediately. Maybe not all of that will go in the space resource sector immediately, but in observation, connectivity, geolocalization, microgravity manufacturing, clearly the opportunity is there, and space resource is important because it's the next frontier.
Thank you. I've got lots of questions coming in from Sarav. I hope I pronounced your name correctly there. I think he's going on the fact that if he keeps asking questions, I'll ask one of them. So I'll ask the last one. Is the crowding of space by corporations in itself unsustainable?
Can you repeat the question, Minister?
I think he means there are more and more companies coming into the space market. Is that in itself?
No, that's a sign of good health of the sector, that there is an opportunity, and I think it's good for humankind. And then there will be, of course, some kind of Darwinism, economical Darwinism, and those companies that are not sustainable, not profitable, will disappear.
Thank you. Lara, we haven't yet heard from you, a very important player, again, with your base in Luxembourg. Just opposite, if you want to visit the EIB or look outside, it's quite hard to get into the building. It takes about 30 minutes, various cards taken from you. The European Investment Bank, you have very strong views on sustainability, etc. So if somebody wants to try to obtain money from you, what are you looking for?
A good project, I would say, and a profitable one. Thank you also to have Charles on stage. Indeed, the European Investment Bank Group is formed by the bank that I represent here today, and the European Investment Fund that has invested in AUDACIA. We are extremely committed to space, I would say increasingly committed to space, which is a good sign. So I concur with Charles that the more the merrier. Of course, it allows financiers to be a bit more selective and to go for those technologies and those companies that are ensuring, I wouldn't say higher profitability, at least I speak for the European Investment Bank, but certainly solid revenue generation. And what we see right now, so just to give you some numbers, the European Investment Bank Group is supporting space via equity to funds of funds. We are now ahead of a new period where we have invested so far below 100 million euro, and we are going into the next period investing more than 100 million euros. So we are doubling our commitment to space in the next years. But we have also launched a new product, which is a venture debt product, which is meant to come exactly when the company that has been supported by VC funds is ready to grow and to have a quantum leap into the next stage. Quantum leap in terms of revenue generation, revenue sales. And the venture debt is the first debt product that a company as such, active in the new space, would be ready to access. It's a very good financial product. Why? Because it allows to contain dilution. Who is in the startup world knows that they are eager to access venture capital funds, but at some point they don't want to dilute their company anymore, and they're looking into growing, yes, into have a sustainable growth plan, but to have a financial product that doesn't dilute further their capital. Here as well, we are venturing on hundreds of millions of support, and we have more leads than what we are able to finance. This is also another good sign. And we are in discussion. We couldn't do this activity without the great support of the European Union. We are the bank of the European Union in the sense as well that our shareholders are the EU member states, including Luxembourg and the other 26. And they ask us to invest in space and in new technologies. But to do that with an affordable pricing, we have to have guarantees on our back to preserve our AAA. So it's usually the European Union and the cooperation with other European institutions, such as ESA, that ensure us a certain guarantee on our back in order to invest and to still keep our AAA. So we are in discussion with the European Union to acquire new, let me say, guarantee envelopes in order to meet the increasing demand of new space investments in Europe. And this, I think, is a very important message for the audience today. What are we seeing as the key point on the table? Yes, the technology risk, of course, it's something. The financial risk is for us to assess. But we see that one of the weakest element when we look at leads in the new space is about the demand forecast, the demand analysis. Usually, once they are clear with the technology, once they have an appetite to discuss with the financier, being a VC or being a bank, then we see a lacking of depth of demand analysis. Usually, we are in talks with ESA on a couple of possibilities to have public-private partnerships on space. And usually, there is a big difference. I hope that I will later have an opportunity to explain difference between what we call a public-private partnership in financing terms and what is a public-private partnership sometimes in institutional terms. The difference there is that the lenders, us as a bank, we look at a very deep demand forecast where we kind of want to see a deep thinking about who are your customers today, who can be your customers in the future, and while currently in the, let me say, in the current landscape, we see a lot of leads where if there is a public sector willing to promote a project, he's also the only sole purchaser of the product or of the sole client of the project. This for us is a limiting factor in a space investment because we want, first of all, diversification of customers. We want also different type, different size, because you never know the volatility of the market, who will buy the technology and the service for longer time and in a more solid way. And we think there is a further work that we are ready also to do together with the other institutions and the industry in driving and inspiring, let me say, the industry in thinking a bit in a wider sense when we think about customers and demand forecast, including in this type of new space and space projects.
Thank you, Lara. We have a question, and please, if you have a question in the room, raise your hand and somebody will come. Oh, there's a question at the back of the room, so hopefully somebody can go with a floating microphone to, yes, there's a question there. And while you're thinking about asking the question, I've got a question online from Paulina Govea Alvarez. What is the key difference between having a sustainable mindset toward Earth's resource utilization and the mindset we need to have sustainable space resource utilization? I might throw this to Julien because, again, in our coffee chat, I know you were very philosophical. I liked your philosophical take on this. And in fact, our conversation was mostly about how space resources can really help Earth. So in fact, you were talking about helium-3, for example, one example, which is a very strong example.
Yeah. So I think to echo what Kathryn said also, I think there's three axes of the space resource and how they can benefit humanity on Earth. We mentioned technology development. I think there was Vlada mentioning how, on the moon we're forced to develop technologies that are waterless, carbonless. We've seen several examples of ventures developing technologies to process lunar regolith and then realizing there's a direct application to terrestrial problems. So we have Mana Electric in Luxembourg, who's also wanting to take lunar regolith to produce solar panels, produce oxygen in the process. But their first development is to use sand on Earth to produce, those solar panels. So a direct benefit of, a space problem to, a translation to an Earth problem in a very sustainable way. I think in the room is Interloon, who came out of stealth mode a few weeks ago, who's indeed intending to harvest helium-3 in order to provide that for future, I think, efforts around fusion, which would have a huge impact in addressing our energy problem here on Earth. So I think these are concrete examples of using space technologies to address our problems here, using resources in space to leverage also our problems here. And the third angle I mentioned was also just from a awareness, consciousness level. It always strikes me how much effort people in this room are spending trying to get a few percentages of mass of water on the moon, while here we don't think twice about leaving the sink running while we're washing our hands. So there's a lot to do there, I think, from institutions and public relations in terms of educating the people about how great water is as a resource in space and how we should not take it for granted here on Earth, and same thing for other resources. So taking a step back with respect to the question that was asked, I think I would say it's not the right way to think about it. I think our view at iSpace is really trying to put the Earth and the Moon as one ecosystem. And now you're trying to optimize resources, looking at that combined ecosystem, and you could include Mars, you could include other places. And so it's not Earth versus Moon or space versus Earth. I think it's really a combined ecosystem and solution space.
Thank you, Julien. Yes, question at the back of the room. If you could, and we have a question here afterwards, if you could say who you are and which organization you're with.
So my name is Shivam. I'm pursuing my master's in space technologies and business at the UniLu, and also working in the Space System Engineering Research Group at SNT. My question is to Lara. So Lara mentioned that for investing on space resources-based companies, you first focus on revenue. But my observation has been that most of the space resources companies are pre-revenue. So what gestation period you target, like after how many years they should start generating actual money?
Good question. Even though I cannot see your face, which I usually like, but fair enough. So thank you for the question. Indeed, it depends very much on which product we are talking about. Of course, we do also finance large corporate that they are already revenue generating, but focusing on venture debt and sticking to venture debt, we look into revenue generation at least in 1 or 2 years from the moment we start looking into the project. And indeed, this is the difficult bit. I wouldn't say that we focus only on this, but certainly this is the hard point when we want to decide to invest or not. Because the technology, of course, by the time we look into the lead, we kind of believe in it. By the moment we are looking into it, the amount of capital that they are trying to raise, the amount of financing that the company is trying to raise is for us well-sized compared to what they have raised, compared to the kind of growth plan they have. And now, what is really often a red flag for us, what is really often, let me say, that we have to call the shot, is about the revenue generation, how much, in which time frame, is not so much the problem that they don't generate revenue today, but is when they're gonna generate revenue, so 1, 2 years, how fast Will they sustain the growth plan that they have? Will they be able to repay our debt? I didn't say, of course, it's a debt with an equity kicker, meaning that can be converted into equity at the end of the repayment period, which is usually also somehow into the 5-year extendable, but the 5-year is a kind of good reference to have. So 1-2 year is the short answer to your question, but indeed is what comes after that matters to us, how fast they're growing and how much they're growing, and did they think really thoroughly about their market and their revenue generation and demand forecasting.
Thank you, Lara. If the microphone could move to, yes, oh, you have one already. I'll come to you in just a minute. I just wanted to really throw it back to Daniel and also Kathryn. We're talking about financial, well, it's collaboration in a way, really, you'll be working with a team. Also, ISA, ESRIC, you use the word collaboration a lot. So when it comes from your organizational perspectives, what are you looking for in a team for the best collaboration?
It depends a bit on the topic. When it comes to procurement, let's not forget, ESA is above all a procurement agency. We love to speak about R&D, but de facto we are a procurement agency. And there, the master word is clearly services. Services meaning that we want to have progressively also companies who are ready to self-invest, who are ready to take risks. And the key question is then to negotiate between ESA and the companies, depending on the type of program, what is the level of risk which is acceptable, and how, of course, they must also have, as it has been said by Lara and by Charles, I mean, at the end, the company must have a valuable business case, and they must be, in a reasonable time frame, get it back. We can dream of whatever we want. I mean, at the end, they must be there tomorrow as well. And this is all what I think, it's excellent that we have a diversifying industrial landscape. And competition will be just a bit harder, but this is what it is about. I mean, if we want to really, if we are serious about the market development, we have to accept that. When it comes, for example, to scientific work, then it's totally different, the approach. There, it is about being top-notch. Good is not good enough. You have to be excellent. This is what we are looking for, because we just want to have the best in a dedicated area.
That's a very definitive answer. Vlada, I think you want to come in.
Yeah, just one thing to add here, really resonated very much with what you just said. A good example in the US, where we know NASA and partnerships with commercial companies is the tipping point, for example. And that's a wonderful example where, for example, Blue Alchemist technology, a core technology in the Space Resources Program, Blue Origin, has been co-funded with, with NASA funds, governmental funds, and internal Blue Origin company funds. And not just that, so it's money that's being put together, but next to money being put together, it's risk that's being shared, and also know-how that's being shared. We have very different approaches. NASA has an amazing heritage of really, being successful, bringing things to space, making it work, having some of the best people in the business. We have the approach of a very much, although we're a big company, of a startup. We work day and night, build things up, destroy them, build them again, and we fail and repeat, and we make it successful. And this together with that really clear vision of, and that's very important, scalability and bringing it to market. And that's the paradigm shift. We've been often used, to build small things, to make it work in demonstration ways. We can't think like that anymore. We can't think from building something up. We have to think from the commercial system, the one that's going to be able to do real things that will be on industrial scale, that actually invites nations and companies and everybody to be there. And then you have to think what the path is to get there, and then get working. And so that's something that I think one really has to see. Think big, make the technology, and really embrace this partnerships between space agencies, banks, and the commercial sector, and then just work your ass off and make it happen.
Thank you. Kathryn, oh yeah, I'll come to you in a moment, Julien. Kathryn, I just wanted to mention, of course, ESRIC, by its very nature, fundamentally, is a collaboration. And you're looking for more people as well. So when you look for new employees, what is it that you're looking for to make this team work? Because you have the 3 pillars to start with.
So when we look at the team that I have, I'm really proud, actually, of where we've come in 3.5 years since launch, 2 years since I've been in the position. It depends entirely on the function. I think just to echo what Daniel said, when we talk about collaboration, when we talk about recruiting, it depends entirely on whether we are interested in the more commercial business support aspects that we do, or whether we're interested in our research topics. So currently we are recruiting in researchers, and there we are looking for people with experience, excellent ideas, and experience beyond necessarily the space resources sector. And I think if you look at the team that we've put together so far, it's really dynamic, diverse. It really reflects beautifully the range of topics we have in space resources, and I think that's also reflected in the activities we do and the collaborations that we seek.
Thank you. We have a question right in front of me somewhere. If you could...
Is that working?
Yes, stand up and tell us who you are, where you're from. Thank you. We have a question over there as well.
My name is Dorian. I'm with Space Radar, a young startup in tracking interplanetary space travel, focusing on the Earth-Moon ecosystem first. And my question, I think, is for Charles and Lara primarily. Charles, I was really happy to hear that you didn't mention defense explicitly as one of the verticals that you're investing in, but perhaps some of the companies are in the defense space nonetheless. There's probably some very lucrative investments there, probably some of the shortest term return on capital. At the same time, if UNOSA does its job successfully, if we are successful as a civilization in preventing militarization of space, there should be pretty significant risk from a profitability standpoint in the long run in investing in such companies, and possibly also from a, let's say, ESG perspective to invest in such companies. So how do you balance this, these two perspectives? Very profitable opportunities, perhaps not the best thing for civilization when thinking about defense investments in space. Thanks.
And just to add to that, I had a chat with somebody from the EIB last week. I know the EIB is looking at defense as well, so perhaps Lara has a comment on that too. So, Charles.
Well, you know, defense is part of our life now. I mean, for the last 2 years, this has been dramatically recalled. So we invest in fact, in aerospace and defense, sorry to say. And most of our ventures, they develop civil services, civil activities, but they can be also of some interest to our security and armed forces, and we cannot avoid this. Now you could say it's a tragedy to bring weapons in the low Earth orbit and beyond, but I think man will always remain man, and we will have to be able to defend ourselves in this new frontier.
So thank you for the question. I would say relevant. Indeed, as Liz said, the EIB is, let me say, looking into stepping up support to the defense sector. Let me move away from defense, because words and buzzwords are important in this 2024 times. So we speak about EU strategic security.
May I also add that you're a cyber lead at the EIB?
Oh, so yes.
And this is connected.
And not only that, so I'm also overlooking the cybersecurity team within my team. And I have heard the new buzzwords. Again, to move away from security, they call it now trust tech, right? So the other way, the opposite way of what you think about security, so trust tech. I find that sometimes words are important, and I think they also add perspective. So indeed, as EIB, we are looking into stepping up support in order to preserve the EU strategic security, and I would say the EU strategic autonomy, which is somehow linked to what we have said. It's a relevant topic, relevant for the EU, for sure, but relevant globally, also to other players, to have, I mean, a growing autonomy somewhere else on the planet. Now, how we get there, and this is the big big question. We are working on the dual-use technology definition, which is for us a key, let me say, parameter. We were supporting defense until yesterday, until today, giving a stronger focus on, when I say dual use, is military-civilian use, right? The technology that is maybe probably developed for a military purpose, then it acquires civilian customers, civilian clients, and therefore the revenue generation is split somehow between military and civil use. Until yesterday, we were asking and we were looking into projects where the revenues were at least 51% coming from civilian use. And now we are revising this dual-use technology definition. Is something that is currently being worked on within the EIB, and I would say in a broader context. I don't have the answer today, but certainly we realize that with the geopolitical situation of today, with the need to build EU strategic autonomy and EU strategic security, we need to do a step further. Always taking into consideration what you call the ESG factor, but also the appetite of investors, because we are raising our capital on the capital markets. We are a AAA, and of course, some investor might have less appetite to buy our bonds if our, let me say, investment on the defense portfolio, security portfolio is actually growing too much. It's at the end, so a matter of cadre, of methodology, dual-use technology, to give us enough leverage, enough space to do something without, let me say, jeopardizing our main mission, which is a climate bank and climate group. It's not going to be easy, but that's why we are relevant, I think, to the market. So there is the need to step up in defense. There is need to further support the EU space industry. We have to strike a balance. What I can say from the first moves that I have seen is that some space ventures and some space VC funds have received financing because there is more overture towards the EU strategic security. So we have to see it also in a positive way because the boundaries are very, very, let me say, blurred. And we have to keep actually a sense of measure, to keep it, of course, to a certain comfortable, let me say, share of the portfolio, and to do it wisely. That's why I go back to the more the merrier. The more ventures we have, the more we can be selective and try to support those where the civilian use of the technology will be driving the growth plan and the scale-up plan. And it's a matter of which kind of methodology we're going to give each other, which will be ultimately decided by our shareholders. We will table something in the next couple of months, as our president said publicly. But it's also about the market. What kind of ventures come with us and what kind of growth plan, how they're going to split between military and civilian, how they're going to scratch their head more on identifying civilian customers probably earlier than what they would have thought doing only 5 years ago. And this, I have to say, I don't have a clear answer, but I have given you our approach, actually, to square their circle. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. Julien.
Yeah, so I wanted to jump back to the previous question and expand on the response from Dan and Vlada, because I think it's not just about finding partnerships between space companies and space agencies. I mean, we're all very comfortable working together. The problematic since the very early days of this event, when it was called the Mining Space Summit in 2018 also, was how do we engage terrestrial resource companies, the Rio Tintos and the Totals and all those guys. In 2018, Anglo-American participating in the meeting, but we had a very hard time convincing them to keep an interest. And that problem kept coming up year after year at the Space Resource Week. And I think it's still pretty much here today. So I really encourage everyone in this group to think, okay, how do we build a case for engaging the real players, the experts who are out there doing this every day? And in your talk, Dan, you mentioned Europe really has to stand up for themselves and prove that we can do it, prove that we can play this game. I think where ispace, we're doing proof by action is one of our values. We have in the room here EPIROC, a mining company, 150 years in the business, and just last year they agreed to partner with us to perform what could be the first regulated resource transaction under the law of space resources of Luxembourg. And I think that's a really good example of a partnership between a terrestrial mining company, a startup, with the collaboration of Luxembourg as an agency, as a government, to prove by action, do the first step, maybe a small leapfrog, maybe not a huge leapfrog, but a small leapfrog, and do a lot of things along the way. Do resource transaction with NASA, test the legal framework, test the technologies to extract resources. That would not be possible without EPIROC, and I think this community cannot really go forward and realize our vision without involving more companies like EPIROC from the terrestrial resource industry, utilities, and so on. We have to do this, otherwise, we'll just continue to be happy among ourselves without having a larger impact.
I can see red flashing lights in front of me, but I'm just going to ignore those because we started 10 minutes later, if that's okay, Delia. 8 minutes. I'll do a couple more questions, because I know we've got a question here, we've got a question here. Daniel wants to come in, and Vlada on this point.
I just would like to jump on what Julian said by making two remarks shortly. Number one, partnership. When we say that we have also to stand up and we have a certain self-determination, let's be clear. If you speak about deep space exploration, you will never do it alone. It will be a collaborative aspect. But if you're serious about partnership, you must accept that the other is also on your critical path. And the question is, what are we putting as an architecture which makes sure that European companies, European scientists, and ultimately also the organizations, the public organizations, are on the critical path in a global international cooperation. This is what we should really aim at if we speak about deep space exploration, which will be costly by definition. And the second remark I wanted to make about attracting non-space sector, I think that's absolutely fundamental. Exploration is above all a lot of logistics. Refueling is one key topic. We are, for the time being, nowhere. We're just starting at worldwide level. There are a number of initiatives, but this will be a key enabler to go ahead or not. And for that, if you think today, you have car manufacturers, and you have companies who deliver the gasoline or the electrical power plugs or whatsoever. I mean, the whole element is about generating a volume which makes it attractive for non-space actors to come in and also have its their part. And in the refueling domain, I see typically a unique opportunity on that. And of course, you could apply this in the same way when you go to research to the pharmaceutical dimension, etc. I will stop here because we have only 8 minutes, but I think there is a lot to say about it.
Yes, keep the answers short, and then I'll ask one more question. Vlada.
Okay, I'll keep it short. I just want to really emphasize here that a lot of, you mentioned our conflicts, we're definitely a world that is full of those, and they're generally related to scarcity. We have to understand a lot of companies that are working on this planet had a lot of decades of things to use. It was there. It was available. It was available easy. It's not available easy anymore. Many of the critical elements, critical metals, our energy sector changing over to hydrogen. All these things are a new paradigm shift. We are making, as a society, a shift that oil was decades ago, before that other things. This shift is happening now, and we are part of that change. And so I think also companies on their side are realizing that, because the markets are not working anymore. And the technology that we're developing are really correlated to the scarcity. Because if there's anything as scarce as surviving, as surviving on the moon. And so we're learning to live with scarcity, and that's going to help us live more sustainable on this planet. Plus, and that's to close in here and later to tomorrow, we should not forget that most of the critical metals and elements we've got from outer space. And I see outer space as an opportunity where we actually don't have to fight, because it is in abundance. And that abundance, I think, is something that's going to empower every nation, every people, and then ultimately from that perspective realize that, we're looking at one planet, so let's get along with each other.
Well, that's a nice positive. I think we had a question in, yes, here.
Yeah, Ben McEwen from UNSW in Australia. Look, I come out of the terrestrial mining industry, and one of the big issues that we have is the whole issue of social sustainability. So through your social license to operate, dealing with your communities, all this sort of stuff. So my question for the panel is, what thoughts do you have in terms of social sustainability for space resources?
Daniel, I think you had your hand up there briefly.
Well, it was to see colleague. So maybe just one element very shortly. Today, the average water consumption in Paris, I know the figure is 150 liters per day and per human being. On the ISS, it's between 5 and 8 liters per day and per human being. Okay, I mean, it shows the cost of the technology is, of course, a bit higher on board of the ISS. It's about bringing it down at the leverage which is applicable to a broad civilization. And I think this will also help the social acceptability of the effort put in space.
And on that part, reason, again, why it's so expensive, right, is because nobody really did it. And that's the big change we got to do, right? And many of the technologies that we're building for space are actually quite simple in many ways. It's the space certification, and because it is really rarely used, that makes it so expensive. And so at Blue Origin, for example, right, what we're trying to do very strongly is to make access to space and make this technology actually affordable, reducing the cost. And to stimulate with that universities, developing nations, and emerging nations can do this too, so that it becomes the standard. And once it becomes the standard, it becomes cheap, and once it becomes cheap, it becomes available.
I'm not sure that's answering his question at all.
But so, just was the question about social acceptance?
Yes.
Yeah, social acceptance. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are not involved in space resources, and they say to me, we're going to destroy the planet.
Yeah.
What are we doing to communicate with these people, with the world basically, on a broad basis, so that we start off with a sustainable view of space resources, rather than going down the route of the mining industry or the oil and gas industry, where, frankly, we fight with every single project we try and get up and running to make it socially sustainable.
Yeah, I can address that. So, look, many of us, even myself, my past history, I was really mainly focused initially on Mars and life on Mars. And there's a large community over there where we put on rules and guidelines in the worst case to even be careful if there could be something that could be related to past or ancient life or science of that, and to take care of this. And that's ultimately scientific regulation, UN regulation, and just generally human sense that comes in there. I think the same, and that's why tomorrow also, that's UNOSA and UN is dealing with that, and we're going to be talking about that. I mean, of course, we have to have principles that we're going to be following as humanity accessing this. But what I try to say, what's different in this situation on the Earth, when we go and get things, we enter communities, we enter people where people are living, we enter different nations. Space is so far, as we know around us, where we're going to go, there will not be humans, there won't be life. It's a different framework which hopefully, if we can work together, is not going to in any way endanger anybody or put people in trouble. It's more in a contrast, actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity where size and vastness is actually allowing us to together explore without damaging. And so I would say that negativity that we have at the Earth is actually very different in space.
Kathryn.
Yes, if I can just answer very quickly. It's a great point. Space resources, the mining industry is unpopular. I know this, having worked in and alongside it for a number of years. The mining industry is unpopular. We would be naive to think that the space resources sector might not suffer from some of the negative aspects around the mining industry. But what's interesting is, since I entered this field 6 years ago, is that the narrative has shifted. shifted. It is shifting. When I first entered this field 6 years ago, the conversation was very much about how we're going to do this, what's the technology, what's the way forward, and so on. And actually, what you hear now is that we are talking in more tangible terms about how we do this in a more coordinated, unified approach. How do we engage with communities? I know there's been a lot more community engagement around cultural references to the moon, cultural aspects related to the moon. We see the UNUSA expert meeting in parallel here. This is about also engaging with other people beyond the people that we typically see in the room. So I think whilst we are not there yet, we are certainly as a sector making more of the right steps towards making this more acceptable than the effect of the impact of the terrestrial mining industry.
Charles has a very tiny comment.
Yeah, well, if the answer was, what about us, human beings on Earth? What does space bring? There are many answers, but this is true. There is some work to do to explain it better. For instance, of course, connectivity in digital deserts. That's low Earth orbit constellations are of course an answer, but also it's progressing very fast. Is space pharma. Is synthesizing molecules, some antibody proteins in microgravity labs, automated in low orbit, and then bring effective drugs to cure some pathologies that cannot be cured on Earth at the moment. So that, of course, would help immensely to prove to the people of Earth that space can bring a lot of benefits.
Thank you so much. And on the word mining, it made me think about trust tech. I think we need another word instead of mining to make it sound, more beneficial. We have some really good questions online. They can be answered by the panel. Some have been addressed directly to you. And I've noticed there's a number of finance questions. So I'm thinking actually now everybody's looking for the money. And also what I've heard from the questions is we have a more philosophical bent to these conversations as well. So it's really an interconnected form of conversation, which I hope you'll continue over lunch. And please don't be late for the next session. Parallel sessions after lunch at 1:30 in -2 the delegates room with Dovile from the Luxembourg Space Agency, and back here for the afternoon for the other parallel session. Thank you and bon appétit. Thank you to the panel.